Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. We're glad to have you with us today. As always, I'm your host, Attlas, and I don't know if anybody's going to show up today because I explicitly said last week that this week there will be no live stream because of Father's Day, and I had plans with my family, but unfortunately those plans fell through. My father took ill, and we had to cancel our plans, so freed up Father's Day. So regardless, if no one shows up, that's perfectly all right. I'll just take this opportunity to get a few things off my chest, as it were, in regards to our Father who art in heaven, the Father that matters the most in our life. It really is something that we should celebrate every single day of our lives. But as it so happens, we can't make every live stream about the same topic, so we might as well tackle this topic on Father's Day, the day which has been chosen or selected to honor our biological fathers, the patriarchs of our family. When we consider the word Father itself, it's interesting because many of the letters in Father coincide with the letters in Arthur. We have A's and R's and T's and H's. And a little over a month ago, when we experienced what I call my Good Friday. And by the way, I might be speaking in we's a lot today, just simply because of the subject matter. But when I experienced my Good Friday a little over a month ago, and what was revealed to me was the unadulterated, uncensored, unedited tree of life. The words at the top of the tree, the top most three Sephira, were Art, Thor, and Isis. So father and son are Arthur, Art, and Thor. And so it is very easy to craft an F out of the lines which connect the Sephira on the tree of life. So father is not all that far off from Arthur. And of course, Keter, the crown, Sephira, is referred to as the Father. That's Brahma. That's in all of the trinities or triunities in all religions around the world. That first emanation from the Absolute, that first expression of the ultimate divinity that goes by many names, but we can generally understand it as God, right? It's a universal understanding that that's God the Father. Now, many people try to explain that no, it's God the Mother, that the divine feminine is the primordial origin of all creation. But we have to understand that that Father is not masculine. That Father is androgynous. It is both divine masculine and divine feminine. And it expresses through creation via the law of three. It separates precisely into masculine and feminine so that it can reunite, and in that reunification creates. And that is why trinities or tri-unities are so prominent in all the great world religions, including Christianity, including Hinduism, including Buddhism, and including Judaism through the Kabbalah, Keter Chokmah Binah. But it's also in the ancient Egyptian mystery schools. It's in Greek mythology. It's in Norse mythology. It's just on and on and on. It's present. And that's because of the universal law of creation, the law of three: masculine, feminine, and union. And though we can say that all of manifest reality is feminine, the body of the universe, all matter, all substance, on all levels of creation. So in other words, all metaphysical matter, if you want to think of it in those terms, all energy is feminine in that respect. The void, the ether, the akash is feminine. That's the body of the universe. That's the body of the Divine Mother. The great void that spirit hovers over. But in order to create, the feminine energy, the divine feminine, cannot create by itself. It has the stuff available, the stuff of creation is there, the substance. But it requires the spark, the seed, the essence. That spirit that's hovering over the surface of the waters. Those primordial waters of the divine feminine. The spirit hovers above them. And inspires those waters. And it is in that act of inspiration that creation takes place. Because the primordial waters, the body of the divine feminine, awaits inspiration to be transformed, to be uplifted, to be inspired, to be all that it can be in all the infinite myriad expressions of that. So that substance in metaphysical and indeed physical form, we can call all of manifest reality on all the different dimensions a kind of substance. Now, why is it substance? Because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Father who stands atop the Mount Olympus, who sits upon the throne. Last week we talked about sovereignty. God has gone by many names, including Zeus, who reigns over the universe from Mount Olympus. There is always a profound truth that God presides over. God reigns, God rules. And in that sense, God sits upon the throne, or he stands at the pinnacle of all creation. To stand is to have a stance. We have these expressions to make a stand, to stand your ground. These are expressions related to integrity. These are expressions related to standing up for what you believe in, standing up for your faith, standing up for others. This notion of standing up, taking a stand or taking a stance. A stance is a principality, a principle on which you stand, a foundation. You take a stance in the name of some truth, in the name of what is right, in the name of the weak, on behalf of those who cannot stand up for themselves. You take a stand, you take a stance. It is the origin of the word constance. Constancy. To be constant. To be ever present. Unwavering. There is a solidity there in constancy. There is a trust in that which is constant, unchanging, unyielding, unflinching. That which stands against all tides. It is this strength, this foundation, this constancy. Constance, by the way, derives from the Latin, con meaning with. And stance, meaning, in just a moment here, we might as well throw this on here. So if we look at the stance's meaning in Latin, the origin of stance, first from 1524, from Old French, istance, or standing position, right? And from vulgar Latin, stantia, derivative of the Latin stem, or to standing, again, to stand. But in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And if we look up the meaning of the word stanza, It's from the Italian. It's a room, a station, a stopping place. And the plural is stanze. From unattested vulgar Latin, stantia, equivalent to the Latin stant, present participle of stare, to stand. And a stanza is the foundational building block of all poetry. Stanzas are unique to poetry. The station, the stopping place. Where you might stand, for instance, awaiting a train. You stand in a station. So in other words, stationary. There's an aspect of stand which means unmoving, unflinching, stationary. The stanza contains the words. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, but God stands in the station. So we have stanza, and the stanza provides this form for the page to take. Stanza is, it's like the space that divides and separates and organizes the space on the page, which is where the words go. And the words and the sounds that they represent, the symbols and the sounds that they create, that they represent, that is that stanza coming to life, coming into activity. And those words mark the page, and those sounds vibrate the space. They vibrate the air. So there needs to be a medium that is put into vibration, or a visual medium that receives the pen strokes that make the symbols according to the stanzas and fulfill the requirement of the stanzas, because poems are organized by stanzas, because in general each stanza in general is making one particular statement. Stanzas are the equivalent of chapters in prose, where a chapter tends to deal with one specific element of the story or one specific topic. In the nonfiction, generally it's organized, it's laid out according to chapters, and a poem is laid out according to stanzas. And then the words come into activity within those stanzas. In other words, a stanza is a container. And then combined, the container and its contents mark the medium of the page and vibrate the medium of the space, which is brought into activity, into vibration. It is inspired. It is that spirit hovering over the waters, and then that spirit penetrates the waters and inspires those waters to take form, to take shape. Just as a potter takes that lump of clay and using the alm of life, spinning that clay around and molds and is inspired to make of that hume of that clay some vessel. Our Father then represents that inspiring presence, that inspiring force. Our Father represents that stance and that stanza. Our physical body and our lives are the page. We receive and we express through this substance, through the substance of our lives. We embody and express the spirit that is moving and playing and expressing through that stanza. We make of our lives that poetry. And we dance to that song. And what are we dancing with? Well, more substance. Because there's levels and levels and levels. And there are forms of substance which are very dense, very hard. They are unmoving, they are unflinching. They are unyielding, and they're mechanical. They're oppositional. They're negating, in other words. One can think of a large block of marble or limestone or any stone, really. In general, large megaliths. These are the most unyielding, the hardest, the most resistant of substances that we know of, certainly that the ancients knew of. And yet, they saw in those megalithic stones possibility, opportunity, potential, potentiality. And they used the power of sound, the stanza, to make that substance yield to their inspiration, to what they could see was the true potential of that substance, of those stones, of that megalith. In the same way that Michelangelo saw that 20-foot tall marble column, and he didn't see a 20-foot tall marble block, a 20-foot tall marble megalith. He saw David. And when they asked him, how did you do this? This is an impossible task. How did you carve this most incredible, beautiful statue? Because David's 18 feet tall. This larger than life expression of that biblical character of David. And Michelangelo said, David was already in there. I just chipped away the excess, and until I could set the angel free. Michelangelo was inspired. And he was inspired through his vessel and his skill and his energy and focus and concentration and all the other faculties available to him. He was inspired to help that block of marble be all that it could be, to self-actualize its highest potential, its highest expression of self. Michelangelo received that inspiration from his Father in heaven. And by surrendering to that inspiration, by following that guidance, by giving himself fully and allowing himself to be inspired, he became the hands of God, the hands of spirit. And he fashioned out of that marble one of the most incredible statues ever carved. He helped the marble become inspired. By listening to his innermost father, Michelangelo birthed David into the world. Michelangelo created David out of a block of marble. Out of one expression of the body of the divine feminine, his own physical body, and the tools that he used and all his faculties, he turned another expression of the divine feminine into an expression of the Christ. The union of inspiration and the body of the divine feminine. He birthed David. He gave birth to David. But he could not have given birth to David without the inspiration that he received from the Father. And just as that block of marble could not, under any circumstances, it could not have self-organized or spontaneously or by the law of chance, there, under no other circumstances could that marble have been transformed into David, other than Michelangelo or somebody being inspired to create David out of that marble. All acts of creation, then, which are inspired, emanate, come from the Father. The origin, the source of that spirit, who stands and oversees, who stands at the pinnacle. Behind me is, of course, the creation of Adam. And again, it is from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, but again, it was painted by none other than Michelangelo. And Michelangelo's ability to capture this moment from Scripture And many have noticed many peculiarities about this particular section of the fresco. For example, how the place where God is, it's shaped a lot like a brain, and how he's situated, it appears like he's reaching out from the pineal gland. So Michelangelo was an esotericist. He knew a great deal about his own innermost Father in heaven. And he certainly imbued his work with that knowledge, even if it was hidden or encoded or subtly. Or perhaps Michelangelo simply allowed himself to be inspired and put himself in that conscious state, put himself in the flow state, in the zone, and allowed himself to be guided. And perhaps he himself couldn't rationally explain why he drew God the way he did, and why he painted that part of the ceiling the way it's painted. All he knew is that he was inspired to paint it that way. Because ours is not to question why, ours is but to do or die, right? And there are many artists who are inspired and they follow the guidance of their inner artist, and they don't stop to question why they're doing it a certain way. They just know they have to do it that way. It's not a rational decision in their mind. It is purely a conscious one. When one surrenders to the will of the Father, then one simply obeys. One does what one's told. One acts according to one's intuition. One acts according to one's higher senses. And we don't necessarily understand in the moment what we are doing and why we are doing it that way in the moment. We might come to realize the significance of what we did, how we did it, and why. Or we may never have that realization if we don't perform, for example, retrospection, meditation on our life. If we don't look back on our day, if we don't look back on our works and see them and analyze them with a fresh, conscious, objective perspective, there may be a lot that is being done through us that we're never truly aware of. Because in the moment, our job, our task, is to serve the will of the Father in the moment. Our Father who art in heaven. We are in the world. Our higher self, our innermost being, our innermost essence of God, the Father, is in the supernal worlds, is in the sixth dimension. But the Father of our Father, the Christ, the perfect multiple unity, is in the seventh dimension. And the Father of that perfect multiple unity, the Father of the Christ, is why even after his resurrection, Christ could talk about his Father in heaven. And at that point, it's safe to say that he's speaking of the Father in Keter and or the Absolute itself. To stand, to have that stanza, the word, to stand is to be. It is why in the Lord's Prayer we say, Our Father who art in heaven. Art in this context means to be. That which is. And the holy name of God, Eheye Asher Eheye, is I am that I am. I am is thou art. When you look at it from a substance point of view, I am is what it is. So when we hear the expression art for art's sake, the academics and the intellectual elites have all kinds of clever evasions and avoidance of the truth as they intellectualize all sorts of nonsense about what art for art's sake really means. But art for art's sake and I am that I am are related, and it is what it is. The way art for art's sake is constructed as a phrase, as a poetic medium, its phraseology reflects that of Scripture. And our Father who art in heaven. And then we have art for art's sake. Art is an act of creation. Art is creativity itself. To say art for art's sake is to say to be creative for the sake of creativity. But we just spent a good half an hour explaining that the source of all creativity is the Father, who art in heaven. There is no creativity without the Father. Without inspiration, there is no creativity. There can be craftsmanship, there can be art history, there can be derivative works, there can be lots of different permutations and reorganizations of that which has already been created. But there cannot be any genuine creativity without inspiration. In other words, AI is not creative. Artificial intelligence cannot be creative. It is not creative. It is derivative. It is degenerative. It is not generative. It is degenerative. Because it is uninspired. Receiving a prompt does not qualify as inspiration. Sure, the person putting in the prompt may be inspired to do so. In which case, the AI at best is just a tool. No different than the hammer and chisel that Michelangelo used to carve David with. It's just that AI, let's say, does much more of the work, but it doesn't really, because AI scrapes other sources of its creativity and then uses its statistical formulae and its learned biases called weights to reorganize and regenerate a, what's the right word here? A composite of all of these, bits and pieces in accordance with what it was commanded to do in that prompt. And then, of course, the way, if you've ever worked with degenerative AI art, you know that it will produce something and you'll tell it, no, that's not what I want. And you keep doing this iterative process over and over and over and over again until it starts to get closer to what it is that you have in mind, or what it is that you're satisfied with. You have to keep telling the machine to keep recompute until you get to something that's closer to satisfying what you are perhaps inspired to create. Much the same way that a director working on a film set or in a theater will have his players, his actors, redo a scene over and over and over and over again until they start to approximate the way that the director envisions that scene playing out. And then the director will tell them, yes, now you're on the right track. Yeah, this is it, right? And having been in the theater, having been on film sets and performed in on stage and on film, I can tell you that in that creative process, the director is essentially God. The director is God. The director is our Father. We can all be inspired in our own way within the confines of our own job. So as an actor, you are inspired to deliver the performance as you are inspired to deliver it. But the director is also inspired. And if his view of how the scene should play out differs from your own, you have to return to your own source or find some compromise to blend your inspiration with his inspiration. Or you seek to better express your inspiration because you know that you're inspired to do it right, but maybe it's just not coming out the right way. Very often, you will hear directors and actors tell stories of how the director saw it one way, but then when the actor was inspired to do it another way, that completely surprised the director. And you might ask yourself, but if they were both inspired, how could one of them be surprised? That's a good question. If all inspiration comes from God and we are all connected and we are all one, then surely all inspiration should gel and mesh, right? But herein lies the unique and beautiful nature of the higher self. The higher self is an individuated essence of God, which means that the higher self, it would be absolutely pointless for God to manifest in such a way that his will was always the same in each and every human being at all times. Because for the very reason that we just gave, he would have no ability to be surprised. He would have no ability to know himself in new, novel ways. If all inspiration was the same, and if all individuals were inspired the same way, then none of us at any point ever would ever encounter music or art or poetry or anything that amazed us, that wowed us, that we were like, that's incredible. We could never be moved by anything that was inspired, because anything that was inspired, we'd look at it and say, oh, that's old hat. Oh yeah, I knew that. Or I could have done that. Last week we talked about sovereignty, and we talked about the word sire. Now, sire is what you call, your majesty. Yes, sire. You refer to the sovereign Lord as sire, your majesty. This is where we get the term sir as a expression of respect for one's elders, for example. I remember in high school, I had to refer to my teachers as sir. And in university, I referred to professors as sir or ma'am, or miss, or ms, depending on the situation. But certainly sir comes from sire. But sire has another meaning, of course. And that is to sire, to give birth to. And it is safe to say that any fathers will tell you, any fathers of multiple children, multiple siblings, will tell you that nobody wants to give birth to a clone of themselves. Likewise, if they have multiple children, well, perhaps twins aside, right? But nobody wants to have 6 children that are all just clones of themselves or clones of each other. That's not how creation works. That's not how procreation works. That's not what it means to sire offspring. There is this element of freedom and baked into the creative process itself must be this capacity for difference, for uniqueness, for individuation. What comes to mind is that scene from The Last Samurai, where Katsumura, at the end, he looks up and he realizes, because he spent his entire life searching for the perfect cherry blossom, and it's only at the end of the film that he glances up and he realizes, they're all perfect. They're all perfect. And yet they're all different. And yet ask any father about his children. Which child out of his 6 children, let's say, which child does he love the most? No self-respecting father is ever going to give you an answer other than, I love all my children equally. But they're all different. It's like when somebody asks you, what's your favorite song? Or what's your favorite band? Or what's your favorite movie? And if you're anything like me, you can't answer that question. How am I supposed to pick one song or one band and say this is the de facto best song ever? I mean, I might talk about Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and the Fourth Movement being objectively the greatest piece of music ever written. But I wouldn't go so far as to call it my favorite. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Because it's classical music. And it didn't move me the way much of the music that I listened growing up moved me. Back when I was a teenager, back when I was in university, or when I was even preteen, because I grew up listening to what they now call classic rock. Or do they call it classic rock or retro? Or I don't even know what they call it anymore. It doesn't matter. The point is that at my age, enough time has passed since the music that I listened to in my youth, enough time has passed that it equals the amount of time between when I was a kid or I was a teenager growing up and what we called the moldy oldies, right? Because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and we used to call the oldies station the moldy oldies, right? Those are the songs of the 50s and before, right? 30 years had passed, 20, 25, 30 years had passed. Right? And over 40 years have passed since you look at the music of the 80s. So it's the same thing when you would ask a musician, perhaps, or any artist, what's your favorite creation? And they would look at their body of work, and maybe they do have a favorite. We don't discount that possibility. But on the other hand, if you have been inspired to do many works, no matter what kind of artist you are, no matter what kind of creative you are, my guess is you would be hard pressed to just pick one and say, this is my favorite, this is the best. You might have many favorites, and you like them for different reasons. You are, in essence, the father of those creations. You were inspired to do so through your Father in heaven. But in terms of art, in terms of artistic output, you are the creator. You are the father of those works of art. You sired those creative works. And so the individuated essence within all of us, our Father within, is unique, is individuated. And one way that we can understand that and visualize that very clearly is by considering a tree. Now, of course, when we think of a tree, we obviously think of, something akin to this. And right, we'll have but then we have beneath the ground we have this whole series of roots. And these roots branch off. And as they branch off, they become thinner and thinner and smaller and smaller. And this is a process that, like the branches in the top of the tree that split off, usually in accordance with the Fibonacci sequence, right, in a fractal pattern, the same thing is happening up top, right? As above, so below. So the branches are branching off, and eventually you end up in twigs, and eventually you end up in leaves, or pine needles, and fruit, and all the other things that's happening over and above ground, right? But below ground, we have the roots. And at the very tips of the very tips of the end branches of these roots, in other words, at the very root tips, that's what they're called, root tips, something very special is happening. This process happening underground is a process of digestion. And specifically, it is a ecosystem. It is a system of mutually beneficial symbiosis that is taking place. It's probiotic, in fact, because in and around the root tip of every single root tip, you have many, many, many countless bacteria and microorganisms. Just like we have in our gut. I might have to make that bigger. Just like we have in our gut, we have probiotics that do what? That help us digest fiber and other substances that we consume. And the bacteria break down those fibers and sugars they break down fiber into sugars that can then be absorbed by the microphilia in the small intestines. The exact same process is taking place in the roots of a tree or any plant for that matter. The bacteria around the roots are what are extracting and breaking down larger mineral deposits to make and they excrete bioavailable micronutrients, which then the root tips can absorb. And why are the root tips absorbing those micronutrients? Obviously, because they go back up. They flow back up the roots into the trunk, and then eventually they go up into the leaves, they go up into the fruit, these micronutrients. Each one of these root tips is in a different part of the soil. Each one of these root tips will have a different ecosystemic relationship with the microorganisms in its vicinity. And it'll work with those microorganisms to break down and absorb the minerals that are available to it, and absorb the moisture also, like the water also. But this is not some kind of monoculture. And you won't find exactly the same numbers of exactly the same bacteria around every root tip. What you find is tremendous biodiversity in that probiotic ecosystem of mutually beneficial symbiosis. But make no mistake, the tree cannot live without the biodiversity of that probiotic ecosystem. The tree cannot extract and absorb what it needs, because those microphilia are very particular, and the tree has no way of digesting larger minerals or substances or fragments, or it has no way of digesting those. They have to be in a bioavailable format, in the same way that we cannot metabolize fiber. It has to be broken down into its more simple sugars. Into it has to be broken down from its. We cannot metabolize carbohydrates that are in those long chains. They have to be broken down. The same thing happens for trees and minerals. Like, just imagine a root tip trying to absorb a pebble. It can't happen. So these microorganisms, these bacteria, they process and they consume organic and inorganic matter, and they excrete bioavailable nutrients, which the tree absorbs. Now, why are we giving you this biology lesson? Because this process is analogous. If we consider the nature of God. God, the Father in heaven. Where is the Father of this tree? Who is like, this tree clearly stands. And this tree has roots which dig into substance, the earth, the soil, the hume. And it reaches down into that substance from where it stands, and, stands is stance. And if we call this root system, if we call what's above here, if we call this, let's say, the heavens or the high heavens, we could even call this the absolute. There can be multiple levels and layers of soil, right, that this root system penetrates into. So, for example, at first you have topsoil, and then beneath that you might have gravel. Beneath that you might have clay. There are many substrates that you get to, and especially for clay, the roots have to become thinner and thinner and thinner because the clay is more dense. So you can't. So the tree and its root system is penetrating the substance of the earth and these different substrates, these different layers in different ways, and it has different types of roots and it has different thicknesses of roots for each of those layers. However, what is universally true of these roots and these root systems is what's happening here at the root tips and the probiotic ecosystem. Now, think of the dimensions and the layers of reality. And we talk about the seventh dimension, the sixth, the fifth, the fourth, and the third dimension. We are in the third dimension. This mortal vessel is doing what? We're down here in the earth. And we even have a name. We're called human beings. Hume meaning earth, and manas meaning mind. Hume, manas, human. And we interact with that earth, with that substance, to do what? To extract something. For whom? What are we extracting? Where is it going? What God, the absolute, requires, which is self-knowledge. God expresses itself. And it hovers over the surface of the substance. But then it has this root system called the Christ, which penetrates. And that's why these roots, when you look at roots, they look like lightning arcing between the heavens and the earth. Christ is Thor. It is the He Zeus, meaning of Zeus, the lightning bolts that Zeus hurls to earth from atop Mount Olympus, from the summit, from the stance. The fire of fires and the light of lights moves between that which stands and that which is beneath. And it descends to the earth, to the world of substance and beyond, because there are levels and levels to this substrate. And we have the underworld. We have, we have even below here, we have what we call hell. And Christ descends into hell to do what? To save souls, to recover, to extract from hell that which is of Zeus, that which must be integrated into the whole, because a tree is no different than you and I. We are what we eat. That is, we are what we digest, what we metabolize, what we incorporate into ourselves. A father is his family. A father is his children. A father is his wife. A father cannot be divorced from any of that. Even if a legal system comes along and creates this clever process called divorce, a father can never be divorced from his children, from that which he sired. They are one. They are intimately bonded as one. And the works of a father's children forever feed that man's soul, his very reason for being. Ask any grandfather or grandmother. Ask them about their grandchildren and about the accomplishments of their grandchildren, and watch as they beam with pride and joy, and how with such exuberance and vitality. If you ever want to reinvigorate and recharge an elderly individual, just sit down and ask them to talk about their children and their grandchildren, and give them some time to ramp up. But in very short order, that elderly person will be animated and excited and talking. Oh, and then my granddaughter did this, and then she did this, and you know who she's dating, or you know what she's doing, or you know what she invented, or you know what award that she just won. It's the same thing when an artist creates something, even a YouTube creator. makes a video, and that video goes viral, and they see their creation proliferating and making a difference in the world, going off to seek its fame and fortune, if you will. Like all parents eventually have to let go of their children and loosen the reins, and the children have to go off and become adults and live their own lives and make their own way in the world. But those parents never stop being parents. A tree is only as strong as its roots. And the fruit of the tree is only as nutritious and filled with vitality and filled with nourishment as those roots have absorbed from the earth, from the substance. Let's take a quick pause here. Tiffany says, what I'm hearing is we are the human bacteria at the end of the root system. And she says, so consider our intake. Consider what we intake. Not just consider what we intake, but consider what we digest, how we digest what we intake. Because you're right. The physical vessel, you and I, the mortal vessel, this body belongs to the earth. This body is made of the stuff of Hume. In the same way that the bacteria belong in the earth, the bacteria are in the soil or in the clay. But if they're smart, they hang around the root tip. And as that root penetrates deeper and deeper and deeper, the bacteria hang around there. Because very often the way the roots make their advance is that they secrete substances that dissolve the Hume so it can go deeper. And in that dissolving of the Hume, that starts breaking things down in a large way for these bacteria then to break down into smaller and smaller. It's a mutually advantageous relationship. The root tip gives an opportunity, an environment for the bacteria to do what they do and produce what they produce that the tree needs, that the root tip then absorbs. But none of this would be possible if there was no root system pushing down into the earth, into the substance. That substance which is constantly resisting it, and all the minerals that are in a form that are resistant to absorption. So there's this dance, there's this interaction, there's this mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. But yeah, absolutely, the bacteria stay in the soil, they live their life and they die, and they're reabsorbed into the soil. The bacteria do not go up into the tree. The bacteria are not absorbed by the root tip. It's what the bacteria digest and produce, the nutrients, the nutrients that are absorbed. The nutrition. And what is it that we absorb? What is it that we value? That God must know itself, the absolute must know itself. And it does so through this process. We can grow da'at, gnosis, on the tree of life, which is up high in the tree of life, only by descending down into the substance. Da'at, gnosis, we could say, are the fruit. The fruit and it just so happens that this fruit is very heart-shaped. But the quality of that fruit is equal to the nutrients absorbed. Nutrients. Whoops. Well, it doesn't want to behave right now, so let's just erase that. Nutrients. Okay, so this is experience. But more than just experience, it's self-evident experiential knowledge. It's what we seek. It's gnosis. But where the rubber meets the road, where that is absorbed, is through our own individual conscious digestion of impressions, of that which we experience. It's not enough just to experience. We must break down that experience. We must comprehend consciously our experience. We must know the significance of our experience. Specifically, we must know God, our Father. In all we experience. Why? Because we are what we eat. And this whole exercise, the whole game, the whole dance is all about God knowing himself, the absolute knowing its nature. Because its nature is nothing. Its nature is nothing. And nothing can know nothing. When you know nothing, yeah, sure, you know nothing. What do you know? Nothing. But what is the nature of nothing? Well, I don't know. Well, why don't you? You said you know nothing. Yeah, but its nature is nothing. There's nothing to know. How does a father know himself without children? Just sit with that. Just a few moments. Or better expressed, can a father know himself without children? Can a tree bear fruit without roots? Can any of us know our potential or our nature or who we truly are without facing the substance that contains within it the nutrition, the source of that knowledge. Can a father know himself as a father? Can a father know his nature without children? And the answer is simply no. Absolutely not. Because without children, he isn't even a father. He's just a man. Unless you sire children, the Father on the tree of life, as revealed to me during my Good Friday, at the end of my Good Friday, actually, it was by that point it was Holy Saturday because it was after midnight. But regardless, on the tree of life, Keter, the crown, Father, was called art, the creator, the act of creation itself. Can an artist know themselves outside of their art or without their art? Art for art's sake, then, creativity for the sake of the creator, so that the creator can know himself. How? Through his creation. But to know what he does not know means that creation must spread far and wide and individuate and express in individuated little microfilaments, microphilia, these tiny little microscopic hairs that are even invisible to the human eye, that constitute the root tip. That is the essence within you and within me. That's the monad, the vehicle, the vessel. And our consciousness is the medium, the capacity for uptake. That's where the absorption takes place. And as Tiffany points out, this physical body, this personality, is just a machine. It's just a mechanical bacteria. It's just a bacteria. And what do? We transform impressions. If we're doing our job, we transform our impressions. We digest our impressions. What we take in through our five senses, and what we experience also psychologically, our thoughts, our emotions, our temptations, and so on and so forth. The transformation of impressions into conscious awareness of God expressing itself through all of this substance that we find ourselves in. Now, how often have you heard me say the living, breathing word of God is all around us and it's within us if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear? But the purpose for it all is to feed that experiential knowledge to our inner Father in heaven, who is in essence a root tip that's part of this greater ensemble. I don't know why it doesn't want to delete things after I draw them, but anyway. And that root system is the Christ, the perfect multiple unity that is made up of countless trillions upon trillions of monads, of individual root tips that are all doing the work of experiencing, but not all do the work of, not all have, let's say, the bacteria that are actively participating in transformation of impressions. Because there can be bacteria who are just in it for themselves and they don't develop a mutually symbiotic relationship. So we haven't fully developed this allegory. So you could also think of the bacteria as the many egos that we have, and that they're all doing their own thing. We also have this personality, we have these, so in other words, there's this dance taking place between the root tip and this collection of these mechanical entities that are doing what they're doing. But the point is that the interaction between the root tip and the mechanical entities produces gnosis. And that is one of the reasons why we shared this, the videos that we did, that we asked, it was in the description for the for today's video, that we asked if you had an opportunity to watch them. The one was called Hi Ren. I don't know if we can. I don't know if I can play them because I don't know if if we're gonna get a copyright strike. But you know, at the very end of the video, he makes it clear that he's. I don't even think it's going to play at all. He's talking about, you know, dancing with the devil, and that's what human beings do. Yeah. So if you watched it, then you know then that we're talking about an individual and a soul who's, of course, he's doing quite a lot of dancing with the devil, as like he says at the end of the song. Has a lot of interactions with a lot of, been facing his demons, but he also points out in the song, and this is something that, you know, I myself have also been experiencing and learning, is that to be softer in the dancing, because if by being rigid, right, we cause, you can't dance effectively if you're stiff. And Ren makes that point very clear in his song, and that it's in the softening of oneself. And if you think about a root tip compared to, let's say, I don't know, the trunk of the tree. The trunk of a tree, and even the big thick roots that are coming off the trunk of a tree, they're more rigid than are the root tips. The root tips are more flexible because they're the ones that have to absorb, and they're the ones that are doing this dance. And if you've ever watched any documentaries that explore the movement of plants, of course, they have to film everything in slow motion and then speed up the footage. But when you do that, you discover that plants are dancing and they're fighting, and they're every bit as animated as you or I or any other animal. It's just that their time frame, their time scale is stretched out. They do everything in slow motion and super slow motion, so slow that you and I can't perceive it. But you set up a camera there and you watch two plants competing for sunlight, for example, and you will watch them. They're like arm wrestling. They're like pushing each other out of the way. They're like, it's incredible. It's incredible. Plants behave. There's no other way to describe it. Plants behave and roots behave. I'm sure you have seen pictures of trees that have strange things in the middle of their trunk or whatever. It's like trees that grew around something, and as the tree grew and matured, that something got stuck there. And they have found like all kinds of stuff in the root systems of trees, and where the roots just, they're like there was something in the way, so the roots just grew around that something, and it just became trapped. It became part of that whole root system. There've been like really weird things like Volkswagen Beetles and stuff that are like literally stuck in the middle of a tree trunk, because it was an abandoned Volkswagen Beetle and a tree was trying to grow there and it grew around it, and there's been some crazy stuff that people have found. So trees behave, and trees have to deal with their surroundings, and they have to deal with the substance of the earth where they're growing. And they have to work with the egos, the bacteria, the mechanical entities that they have to work with around that particular root tip. So if the egos are, let's say in my case, fear, right, that and the epilepsy and everything else that and the depression and everything else that I deal with related to that, well, what is it that I need to learn and have to learn? Well, it means that I can't focus myself on learning the lessons of envy, because I'm not envious, right? So the root tip has to absorb the nutrients related to those bacteria that's in its micro ecosystem, that's in its symbiotic relationship. This is why self-knowledge and knowing yourself is so important, and knowing what it is you're dealing with, these psychological aggregates, these egos that are within you, because they're there to give you something. They're there to teach you something. But what they have to teach you is not up to you to decide. To put it another way, the root tip is part of a root and a root system that pushed it there, that put it there. So maybe the tree sensed that there was a source of valuable information over here. Well, let's put this root there with that root tip to go and extract that nutrient, that particular learning. And in order to do that, there's certain bacteria that need to be in that place breaking down those nutrients that we can absorb. But it's not the root tip that gets to decide that, because the root and the root system is what's moving and animating and pushing it down deeper and deeper into the darkness, deeper and deeper into the substance, even into hell, as the case may be. But there's something of value there that the tree needs, that the root has been tasked with absorbing, and that our higher self, our Father in heaven, has been tasked with learning, yes, but also expressing, as the case may be. Obviously, it's not the most comprehensive and perfect allegory or analogy. Sorry, it's not the perfect analogy. But it answers the question of who is our Father in heaven. And as we go deeper into ourselves, just as you contemplate this analogy of a tree, where is the tree? Where is the being of the tree, if not everywhere? At least insofar as the tree is concerned. And if the root is charged with extracting this or that nutrient that the tree requires, then our true self, as an extension of that root system, and then we're confronted with these mechanical entities that perhaps we have to use our consciousness and stimulate in some way, as the root tip will secrete substances into its surrounding area that starts to stimulate the bacteria in that area to become active in breaking down the very thing that the root tip is charged with absorbing. So there's a communication takes place. It is a very complicated, complex series of interactions that, when you look at it across the whole spectrum of the root system, and millions upon millions of these microscopic hairs, these root tips, then you realize you're dealing with complexity of orders of magnitude that are beyond the comprehension of a mere mortal human being. But just look within yourself and you discover the nervous system, the central nervous system. And all of the nerve endings and all of the synapses in the brain and around the heart. And you discover that we are a sensory processing, information gathering, processing, impression, absorption, and digestion machine. That's what we are. And then, of course, we have the other ability, the other potential task of expression. Because for some of us, our innermost being, and this is where, if you want to work with the same analogy, you can imagine that if some of those branches are and the leaves, and the creation of fruit, right? Some of that fruit is meant to fall to the earth and nourish the earth. Because if you've ever looked at an apple tree, for example, for every apple that gets picked, at least 2 or 3 apples fall to the ground and end up rotting. It's just the way it is. So if you want to continue using this analogy, for many of us, it's not enough just to transform impressions and absorb that self-evident experiential knowledge. For some of us, we're also here to bear fruit with that knowledge. Take that knowledge, repackage it, repurpose it, and represent it, and give it back to the world in the form of a juicy, consumable morsel of nutrition. Which is a whole other kind of novelty, because now God gets to experience and realize all the different ways that his truth can be expressed and can be shared, and all the novel ways in which that can take place, given the unique environment and circumstances of the individuals involved. Not only the messenger, but also the recipients. It's like, for example, our humanity at this particular time, we are experiencing a lot of suffering, and a lot of individuals are experiencing a lot of personal suffering, and that's another reason why we shared the Ren song. Where is it? Okay. Because this is an individual who, he's obviously based a lot of his art, his music, and his lyrics on his experience, his very personal, deep, psychological experience. And it's the kind of song, the kind of music and rap, it's combining so many aspects of contemporary culture into a single expression. And it's a novel expression. And he even calls himself out for the fact that Eminem has made a rap like this, and that other artist that we shared, that other rap artist that we shared made a similar thing. But my guess is the Eminem song is probably as egotistical as the other one. This high Ren is not it's not an ego-driven enterprise. Other artists may have been inspired to do or attempt this kind of inner dialogue and putting it to music, but their efforts did not bear enough fruit that they be drawn to my attention. I only shared that other rap musician's song to offer you a comparison. And really a contrast, because they appear on the surface to be very similar, but beneath the surface, there's a lot of overlap. But if you go deep enough, you realize that Ren has gone much deeper in his self-understanding, in his self-awareness, and in his expression of that. But the song came out a year ago, or he published it on YouTube anyway, a year ago, the video. It's had just under 30 million views. And it has spoken to many, many people on many levels. It's just another indication that the world is beginning to awaken to, if nothing else, beginning to awaken to the reality of the human condition. Because this young fellow makes no bones about the nature of what he was dealing with. Our Father, who art in heaven, as we said, is defined by his children. And the tree analogy is evidence of this. The tree above cannot be different than the roots below. And the quality of the fruit above is going to be reflected in the quality of the substance and the earth and the activity that's happening down below. As above, so below, in other words. And God loves his children, as all good fathers do. And God, and last week we were talking about sovereignty, a Lord, a king, a wise and benevolent and loving ruler takes care of his people. And he seeks to heal any plague that has beset his nation. All rulers, all kings, all emperors who have had any semblance of conscience have known that their people look up to them like a child looks up to their father, and that the people turn to them for answers and for action in times of need, in times of trouble, in times of uncertainty. And this humanity is experiencing its times of trouble and its times of uncertainty. And that sovereignty, that wisdom, that guidance, and that love and that care is making its way into the world and is expressing itself through many, 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 many voices, many, many, many messengers. And a part of that message is, look, you're a root tip. You're a human being. You're the human condition. Your role as a root tip is to dance with those bacteria. To dance with the devil. And you will hear that a lot. And people say that a lot. Oh yeah, dancing with the devil, dancing with the devil. And it's there's wisdom in that statement. Don't get me wrong. But let me ask you, even if you look at your life, even if you look at yourself, and you see your life and you observe yourself, and you see yourself dancing with the devil, with your defects and vices, with your egos, with your demons, however you want to call them, it doesn't matter. And you've seen yourself dancing with the devil, let me ask you, who leads? Nobody mentions that. Maybe it's because contemporary dancing has all but eliminated the concept of somebody leading. Because getting jiggy in it, in a disco or in a nightclub or whatever, right? You're just jumping up and down to the boom, 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 boom beat of the house music, right? It's just a chaotic jumble of bodies. But guess what? That's not dancing. That is not dancing. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's not dancing. It's a kind of dancing, perhaps. So maybe it's uncharitable to call it not dancing. But the reason why traditional dancing, at least in the West, but elsewhere around the world, was always a man and the woman, and the man led, traditionally, the man leads. Because when you really know how to dance well, you know when you know how to pass the torch and you lead for a while, and then you let the woman lead. And then you take the wheel again, and it's this exchange back and forth. But someone has to begin. Someone has to start the process. And someone has to lead that process of that back and forth. But in terms of Dancing with the Devil, ask yourself, who leads? No one seems to ask that question. And then consider the following. Who is dancing with the devil? And then who leads? And when we're talking about our Father who art in heaven, right, the patriarch, the divine masculine, who inspires the substance, the divine feminine, to do what? To be all that it can be. So what does it mean to lead? You ever seen a good dancer dancing ballroom with a woman? What happens? Who does the audience look at? And why? Because knowing how to lead, it's not about control, it's about service. Because when you know how to dance, and you're the male, the man in that pairing, in that dance, you know what your job is. Your job is to make your partner, the woman, look and feel spectacular, resplendent, angelic, like a goddess, so that she moves and she radiates pure joy and bliss and freedom. How is that possible? You're leading her. Ah, that's the trick, isn't it? That's the art, isn't it? Michelangelo set the angel free when he carved David. He freed David. Did he ever let the stone choose which chip to take off and which chip not to? The artist, the divine inspiration, the divine artist was in control of that process. That is clear, that is obvious, because the end result is nothing short of miraculous. And it's miraculous precisely because what was liberated from that block of stone is the essence of that stone's monad achieving a self-actualization that it could never have done on its own. If you observe ballroom dancing, it is infinitely more interesting than somebody dancing by themselves. Even if she's a ballerina, there are, and I know because I figure skated for decades and I did ice dancing. That was my specialty. That was my sport. There are movements that a woman cannot achieve without a man, period. And forget about another woman. No. There is no other woman who's lifting another woman over her head with one arm and then spinning around on the ice. Now that's pairs. That's pairs skating. That's not ice dancing. In ice dancing, you're not allowed to lift your partner above your head. That's a different aspect of. But pairs is just a more acrobatic and gymnastic version of dancing. That's what pairs is on ice. But ice dancing is more traditional. But still on the dance floor, there are ways that a woman can only achieve, there are movements that she can only achieve in partnership in a dance with a man who knows what he's doing, who knows how to lead that dance. Period. It's just a fact. And no ballerina can achieve those movements on her own either. No dancer, under any circumstances, by themselves, can achieve certain movements. In other words, there are certain expressions of that divine feminine force in that woman's body that can be expressed only by being led by a man properly in that dance. This is that beautiful and mysterious and wonderful interplay dance between the masculine and the feminine. But let's take it outside of that particular analogy, literal dancing, and let's move it into something like, oh, I don't know, rock climbing. Now, rock climbing is a solitary activity. And the objective fact of rock climbing is that there are certain achievements that are only possible with the dance between the climber and the rock face. And the climber who's inspired to climb the thing in the first place, and he's in the flow state, and he's following the guidance of his innermost, and that rock face, which is at once the substance, the earth, which is at once trying to help him get to the top and trying to kill him. And the push-pull of that, the tension of that. And then we talk about tension, and we have to go back to the tango. Again, a dance, what's all about tension and creating this tension between the two dancers. And that push-pull, that force between the two dancers and that tension between them tells the story. And it's this new thing that's created. And all of this comes back to inspiration, which comes from the Father. The Spirit which inspires, which enters into, which interacts with the substance in order to create that art, to not just express, but also to have the experience and the knowledge, to reap what you sow. And that because art and Father are synonymous, our Father who art in heaven, art being to be, the Father is that which is, but the Father is only knowable to himself as a Father, and therefore is only knowable through his children. And our monad are his children. And we are a child of our monad. And our works, what we do in the world, if it's inspired, are the children of our innermost Father in heaven. And our experiences that we digest and process and comprehend are his experiences, which are then sent back up through the divine root system all the way to the absolute. God knowing himself, a Father knowing himself through his children and their works. But a father never stops being a father. A father never stops caring for caring for his children. And a father never denies his children the guidance and the support that they need. Unless in certain situations that is what's best for them, that they need to do it on their own. Because there is a time to let go of the back of the bicycle. Remember in the 70s, everybody used to ride these banana seat bikes, and the banana seat had a handle on the back. When you were learning how to ride a bicycle, your father would run behind you and hold the banana seat. And then eventually, once you got running fast enough, he couldn't keep up with you anyway, but he could tell that you had your balance and that you were riding, he would let go. And you would know. You're sitting there riding, you think your dad's holding the seat, and then you look behind you and he's way, way behind you. And you realize, oh my God, I'm riding my bicycle on my own. We've all had experiences like that. And sometimes God has to hands off, right? As a parent, you know this. You got to let them do their own thing. You got to let them make their own mistakes. Unfortunately, nowadays, parents have forgotten this because early childhood development people and pediatricians and all this kind of stuff got it into their heads that everybody's problems are all based on trauma and childhood trauma. So all the kids were bubble wrapped, right? The millennials and Gen Z and stuff, right? And it's nonsense. It's not how to be a father. That's not how the father, lets us live. He lets us live with free will, which brings us back to this whole question of sovereignty that we talked about last week. Because all of this is related, right? Because a father, the patriarch of a family, yeah, he sets the rules, this, that, and the other thing, but he doesn't rule anybody's life, does he? Setting the rules and ruling are not the same thing. But our innermost father does rule and should rule. And dancing with the devil, it is our innermost father who is the one dancing with the devil. The devil is a part of this machine, this mortal vessel. The devil expresses in our heart, in our mind, in our body. So when we dance with the devil, who leads? And why do you lead? Do your egos, in a way, they're there to make somebody look good. It's called the I, themselves. Egos want to make themselves look good. Egos want to make themselves feel good. How about your innermost being? What happens when he leads? Who ends up feeling good? Who ends up doing incredible, amazing, remarkable, resplendent things? When your innermost Father in heaven leads. What Ren and what the other rapper, especially the other rapper, they at least have figured out as much that this dark side of theirs, their shadow, their demon, the devil, is them. They got that part right. But Ren seems closer to understanding or comprehending in the lyrics and the way that he presents things, he seems closer to understanding that his true self, who he really is an essence of God. Is his Father in heaven. That's who we truly are. A human being is hum, manas, and being. And the dancing with the devil is that are the defects and vices and egos that are the substance, that earth that we are here to digest. We work with them as long as we need them, but it's in the dance with them. But who leads that dance? We have to know this. And if we think that we are qualified to lead that dance, then you have to think back to the rap songs and the rappers, and even their realization that their egos are them. So when you say that you're qualified to lead, but your egos are you, your shadow is you, your dark side is you. So then who leads? We are children of God. We are a child. The mortal being, the mortal vessel is a child. Now, generally speaking, a child has but two choices. Certainly, if you think back to your childhood at any given moment, especially if you had a strict upbringing, if you had strict parents, you knew that in any given moment, you had but two choices: obey or disobey. To be good, to do what you knew was within the rules, what you knew that your parents would be okay with, or do whatever you wanted, which you maybe could care less if you were breaking the rules or not. But obey or disobey, that's really what it came down to. As an adult, right, because you don't feel yourself like a child, we are a little bit more charitable with the words. And we say, your choice is to be or not to be. Dancing with the devil is fine, but if you don't know who leads, you're in trouble. And if you think that you are the one who leads and has the right to lead and should be leading, then you're in even more trouble. Because you've forgotten your Father in heaven. And you've forgotten who leads. You've forgotten your sovereign Lord and Master. And you have lost your sovereignty if you think that you lead. Because rewatch those videos and ask yourself, especially in the second one, the Tom, I can't remember his name for the life of me. Oh gosh, that's not it. Anyway, the second rapper video that's in the description. The Ren one, Ren knows that he is the devil that he dances with, or rather that God is dancing with through him, the human being. He intuitively knows that, even if perhaps he might not be able to express that literally, but intuitively he knows that, because it comes through in the lyrics and it comes through in the music, but specifically in the lyrics, and also it comes through in the structure of the composition. In the second rapper's song, it's all just ego. He just has two different sides of his ego fighting with one another. It's just divided and conquered. Ren shows more the indications of being a triune human being, because he brings God very much into the picture. That higher power is very much participating in that dance. And if anything, he recognizes and he registers that the human being is the dance floor. We are the earth in microcosm. And it's God and the devil playing their eternal dance, the eternal conflict, the eternal gain for what? The souls of humanity. And what is the soul? The soul is psychology. And what is psychology? Psychology is the accumulation of all your experiences and all of your knowledge, and all of your experiential knowledge. That is the currency of the universe. That is the currency of the high heavens and the hells. Consciousness and creative energy. And that creative energy is God. It is art. That which is art for art's sake. Creativity for creativity's sake. Who is the creator? That which inspires. The spirit that moves, that hovers over the surface of the water. The spirit that moves those waters and allows the spirit moving within those waters to move us and move others. To be moved to tears, for example, by a beautiful piece of music. Benjamin Ochoa says, that was very cool, the part about the relationship between God and nature. I was going to say something, but then I decided to hear out your explanation. Makes sense still then. As above, so below. Everything is an expression of the Creator. Everything around us at all times is expressing that truth. And if you meditate on Marshall McLuhan's axiom, the medium is the message, now you comprehend why retrospection meditation is so important, and meditating on the self-observation, self-remembering, and retrospection meditation on the events of our day. Because that is how we can transform those impressions and extract, digest, metabolize, and absorb the self-evident experiential knowledge, the gnosis, which is what? Self-knowledge. The knowledge of God and how God is expressing and acting and playing out in our life in this dance, that God is dancing through us and dancing with the devil. And our free will at any given moment in time is simply to allow ourselves to be led by God or allow ourselves to be led by the devil. That's it. There's no other choice. You have no other choice at any given moment in time. You are either being led by your Father in heaven or you're being led by the devil. You're one of your many, many, many egos. That's it. To be or not to be. That's it. That's your only choice. That is the question. So dancing with the devil is all fine and dandy, but who is leading? You have to know that. If you don't know that, you're lost. You don't know anything. Because that's all that matters from the perspective of the mortal vessel. That's our job, to be led and to resist the temptations of those entities within us that would take over the reins and would lead us in a completely different direction. Benjamin says, nothing in nature is random. A thing appears random only through the incompleteness of our knowledge. That's Baruch Spinoza. And Tiffany says that she agrees with Benjamin. I thought the analogy worked very well with what was being stated and shared. We might as well wrap up, make it a kind of a shorter one this week. But I welcome any questions or comments that anyone has. Also, if anybody has any feedback on the videos, the Ren video, for example, or the other one, if you had an opportunity to watch them. If not, the links are in the description of today's live stream. And I would love to play them. And there's probably a very good chance that I could get away with playing them and not get a copyright strike. And yet, maybe it's better that we just wrap up our time together, and then you can watch it on your own, and then you can pause it and stop it and meditate or do whatever, you know what I mean? You can consider it on your own time in your own way, because it's a very personal video. And also, it's an opportunity for you to practice absorbing and digesting the impressions, understanding and remembering your Father in heaven and the self-knowledge that he's looking for. Can you hear God expressing himself in these two videos? And if so, how are those expressions different? And if not, which video can you hear God being expressed through and which one can you not? Like, this is something it's for every individual. You don't need me sitting here taking apart those videos and analyzing them and doing a reaction video to them and everything. No, I would much rather have you have a personal experience with them, revisit the videos, calm your mind, relax, and watch them with your free consciousness and try to digest what they're really saying, or what they're showing, what they're revealing. And remember your Father in heaven, our Father who art in heaven. These are two works of art They're artistic in any case. And, it's your opportunity to practice what we've been talking about today and recognize that, moving forward, every moment of every day, I'm a root tip. Within me is this tree of life, sure, but that tree of life is multidimensional, going all the way to the seventh dimension. But I'm here now, here in the third dimension. My job, I'm the tip of the root system that feeds that tree of life, and that extends up into the absolute and bears fruit for God himself, the Father of all fatherhood. Tiffany says, I will say, she continues, the first time through High Ren was a bit difficult to watch emotionally and psychologically. She said it was the initial hit from that. And there's no question. It's a very emotionally charged, deeply personal, deeply profound, and hard-hitting, powerful, no punches pulled expression of raw emotion and raw experience. No doubt, no question. Benjamin Raphael says, thank you for the reminder that today is a day of remembering our Father in heaven. The world is flexing its earthly dad, but has forgotten about our Father in heaven. Thank you for today's breadcrumbs. Oh, you're so welcome, Benjamin. And thank you all for showing up under such short notice, because I didn't intentionally lie to you all last week when I said this week was supposed to be canceled, but it absolutely was. And unfortunately, my father took ill. So we had this picnic that we were supposed to go to, the Father's Day picnic at the Hungarian Canadian Club in Cambridge, not far from where we live. And there was going to be a cookout and everything, and having some Hungarian delicacies and so on. And my father was all geared up and ready to go, but unfortunately he got a throat infection yesterday, and he knew he wasn't going to be well enough to go today. So so thank you for being here, and thank you for giving me a chance to share with you these videos, and I think the serendipitous nature of it all is that you see these young men who have strained relationships with their Father in heaven, and they're dancing with the devil, but do they know who's leading? And have they thought about it in these terms? And the reality is that is the reason why I have resisted the dancing with the devil idiom for so long, because I also didn't put two and two together and say the reason why I didn't go around talking about it was always for me a chess match, or this and that and the other thing, because you cannot use that expression, dancing with the devil, unless you qualify it with, but make sure who leads. And if there's one takeaway today, that's the takeaway. Whenever you hear people using that term, or you're tempted to use that term, or you're encouraged and inspired to use that term, fair enough, because there's wisdom and knowledge and truth in it. But if you don't qualify it, if you don't know, if you don't understand, if you don't make it clear to people what that really means, dancing with the devil, and who leads, then dancing with the devil is a trap. The term, the phrase, the idiom, it's a trap. Because it can give people an easy excuse. Oh, I'm dancing with the devil. Oh, dancing is fun. I'm just dancing with the devil. And they think they're just getting jiggy with the devil, and it's all fine, and it's all cool, and it's all wonderful. It's not by accident that these videos appeared right before Father's Day, And there is absolutely no coincidence whatsoever, nor any premeditated anything with regards to today's talk, with the incorporation and the integration of what's happening in these videos, what's being expressed by these musicians, by these artists, within the context of our Father who art in heaven. Remember, the mortal self, the mortal being, is a child. And like all children, our free will comes down to obey or disobey, to be or not to be. To honor our father and mother, or to be led by the devil. Who leads in that eternal dance between light and dark within us? And do your best. And if you see yourself being led by the dark, recognize that, and recognize also that says, okay, sometimes I got to be led by the dark. Why? Well, because how else am I going to know myself? How else am I going to know the devil if I occasionally don't let him have his way? And I shared this with someone recently when I was talking to them about learning how to throw the devil a bone every now and then. Like if you think of your dark side, your shadow, as a wolf, you think of that book called Steppenwolf, which means walking with the wolf. And we all have that dark side, that dark wolf within us. And if you resist the temptations of that wolf all the time, nonstop, the frustration and the resentment that can build up in that wolf, and the hunger that can build up in that wolf, is like a pressure cooker. It's building, it's compounding, it's becoming more intense and more intense and more intense and more intense and more intense until it can burst. And a practical example of this are Catholic priests and nuns, which take a vow of celibacy, but they're not taught the Eastern practices of pranayama, of how to circulate the sexual force. And if they're very pious, and if they're very strict with their celibacy, but they're not practicing pranayama, they're not circulating the sexual energy becomes stagnant. It putrefies, just like still water on a pond. If there's no water circulation, it becomes putrefied and algae ridden, and right, it's a putrid, fetid pool of water. Well, the sexual energy can become just like that, a putrid, fetid pool of energy that builds and builds and builds, negative, frustration, right? It's not getting expelled, certainly, but it's also not being transmuted. It's not being circulated and transmuted and refreshed like you would have a pump on a pond and a little waterfall circulating the water to keep it fresh and vibrant and vital. So as a result, you have all those terrible, terrible cases of pedophile priests or nuns who were in the schools when they were ran by nuns. The Catholic schools were ran by nuns. They were violent because they were always high strung and frustrated, and they would take out their frustrations on the students, and very often they would use, beatings with canes and all kinds of. You hear all these stories of the olden days with these nuns and how vicious they could be. So, as a Gnostic, if you're practicing scientific chastity, you want to be sure that you're practicing pranayama regularly, and that you have outlets for your creative energy. So you're using your sexual energy in a positive way. We're not encouraging anybody to masturbate. We're absolutely not encouraging that. But we're encouraging you to learn pranayama or learn the Vairoli mudra of the rites of rejuvenation. Or if you have a partner, practice white tantra to transmute the sexual force, but also to be creative in positive ways. Channel your creative energy, that creative force, into doing beautiful things or making beautiful things that serve others or serving others, right? Doing physical work for the sake of others, or making music, or in other words, working with that creative energy in a positive way. And then you can do runes, you can do mantras, chanting, meditation, of course. All of those practices are transmuting your creative force, using your creative energy in a positive way and transmuting it in a positive way. You're utilizing those forces in a positive way. If it remains stagnant and unused, your dark side, your shadow, your demons, your wolf is going to be sitting there salivating and becoming more and more hungry, more and more frustrated as it's denied what it wants. So, if you live with a kind of demon that I do, or that if you're an alcoholic, or if you have some other addiction that you struggle with, and you know that abstinence after a period of time sends that particular demon into a kind of fit of frenzy. And by abstinence, I mean abstaining from alcohol, for instance, or abstaining from cigarettes. Like if you are a smoker and you smoke to calm your nerves, and you give up smoking, and you become more agitated, and then you become more nervous and agitated and high strung, and you're snapping at people, and you become anxious, and your anxiety, you start having panic attacks. Is it going to kill you to have a cigarette? Is it going to kill you to chew some nicotine gum, or put on a patch, or do what a friend of mine does, which is have an edible gummy? By that I mean it has the medicinal compound from marijuana in it, and it's like his wife is going through cancer treatment right now. He's an alcoholic. He hasn't had a drink in years. And for the past 18 months, him and his wife and his family, his two young girls, have been going through this arduous and harrowing test, because it's really a test of nerve of his relatively young wife going through cancer therapy, chemotherapy, and all the rest of it. And he's an alcoholic, a recovered alcoholic, perhaps, but he the demon is still there. The demon doesn't go away just because you stop drinking. And he's been put to a test as a father. We talk about fathers, right? As a husband, as the patriarch, the head of the household. He's now looking after the girls. He's looking after the house. He's looking after his wife, and he's looking after his business, which that didn't go away either. He didn't get to put his business on hold just because his wife got cancer. So all of that burden, all of that weight, all of that stress, that test weighing down on him, and he can't let himself have a drink. But rest assured, the wolf is snapping at his heels, and the wolf is licking his chops, and the wolf is looking at him any minute now, like he's gonna like just rip him to shreds. And by that particular wolf means ripping him to shreds means getting him to fall off the wagon and go on an alcoholic binge. Because when your wife's going through cancer and you've got two little young girls and everything else, right? It's, there's something's got to give at some point. The stress, the pressure, and everything, right? There needs to be a release valve. There needs to be something. You need to be able to throw the wolf a bone. But an alcoholic can't take a drink. He can't take a drink. Because recovering alcoholics will tell you that they can't let themselves so much as have one drink. So what do? My friend, in his wisdom, in following the guidance of his higher self, his innermost being, said, it's okay. Don't start smoking marijuana. Don't get into drugs. Just go and get yourself some edibles. They're little gummies. They're like gummy bears. And when it's really too much, and when it's really, you really feel it, and when you're really on the edge and you're getting pushed to and you can hear the wolf snapping at your heels and growling and licking his lips, and he's this close to getting you to snap, relax. Go ahead. Go to the cupboard. Go to the medicine cabinet, because it's in the medicine cabinet where it belongs. It's medicine. And have one and just relax. And he tells me he can have one or two. I can't remember. So it's one or two of these little gummies, and it's enough to take the edge off. And he makes sure that, it's after, the girls are in bed, everything else, all his responsibilities for the day are over. It's just him now, and maybe him and his wife, and they're just, like sitting down in front of a movie or whatever, and it's just like putting on some music or whatever. He can take one of these gummies and just relax and let the edge of the stress and everything that whatever is going through, and just takes the edge off. He doesn't get high, he doesn't get whatever. It's almost like taking like any other medication that's for anxiety, or I don't know what these medications names are, but it's like taking the edge off of all of that. And I've never discouraged him to do that, because I haven't walked a mile in his shoes, number one. And I put myself in his shoes, and I know how weak I can be with my little addictions. See, the problem with my addictions are things like sugar and ice cream and carbs and shit like that. Well, guess what? Right? There's no potato chips anonymous, right? Like there's no carbs anonymous, sugar anonymous. There should be, but there isn't. And unfortunately, that type of stuff, right? You can have some, and it's not the end of the world. Well, the problem with that is the good thing about it is you can have some and it's not the end of the world. The bad problem with it is you can have a lot and it's not the end of the world. There's no immediate, dire, life-threatening, like life-altering, life-imploding consequence if you so-called fall off the wagon, as there is for a recovering alcoholic taking a drink, or any other person suffering from an addiction, like a gambling addict who goes into a casino and sits down at a slot machine. Boom, that's it. They're going to be there for 8 hours, right? So there's levels. But if someone who can't quit smoking, there are these things that they sell that you can put they're not vapes. It's this thing called Fume. And they put this little flavor capsule in this little wooden thing. It looks like a very classy, like a cigarette, You don't light it. There's no battery in it. It's not mechanical. It's just a little like almost like incense, but you don't burn it. It just has like, it's almost as if somebody took like a little sponge or something and put like essential oils on it or something. So it just has like some flavor, just as you breathe in like this, and you'll get some kind of like flavor in there, but you also get like the fidgeting thing and the habit thing of having the cigarette. So if someone can't quit cigarettes, and to, nicotine gum doesn't work for them, the patch doesn't work for them, because it's not so much the nicotine that they crave, it's this that they need, right? So then why not use a crutch to help you get to the next level, right? Or if you do need the nicotine, then use the patch, chew some gum. But going cold turkey and then forcing yourself into that position while your demon is still very strong and still has a strong hold over you, you right? You have to recognize, you have to respect the wolf. So throwing the wolf a bone, I don't know if you've ever seen a dog with a bone, like a nice juicy bone, like a lamb leg. That will keep a dog occupied for hours. For hours. My little dog, my little Wolfie, years ago, if I gave him a lamb leg bone, he would just deaf, dumb, and blind to the world for 8 hours. And he would push it around the deck, the whole deck. He would like his entire world was that lamb leg for that 8 hours. And it would have gone longer, except that it was bedtime. I had to take the bone away from him, right? And then he would get it the next day. And so for an entire week, it was his life was this bone. So throwing the wolf a bone is a way to, quote, dance with the devil, where you make sure that the devil is not leading you. But at the same time, it's like when you dance with a partner. When a man dances with a woman, he has to respect her. He has to respect her. That's not an accessory. That's not a plaything. That's not a doll. That's a human being, and she deserves respect. And as you dance and as you become familiar with someone, with a dance partner, then you know when to pass the baton. You let them take the reins for a while. Now, you would never call this throwing them a bone, by no stretch of the imagination, but I want to use that terminology there. But the point is you respect the partner that you're dancing with. Yeah, you might be leading, but you respect that the person that you're with has the capacity to lead, right? You can never underestimate and never be naive and never take for granted anything. And so remember that when we talk about this analogy of dancing with the devil. Because the devil, from his point of view, he's not in it to make you look good or to make you successful. He's in it for himself. Despite the fact, and this is why the chess analogy is so powerful and so meaningful, because your opponent is your opponent, but not your enemy. Your opponent is the adversary, but not the enemy. On the board, however, he must be ruthless. And yes, it's a dance between you and your adversary, you and your opponent. And the pieces are like doing this dance on the board, but it's also a game. And it also has a win state, a lose state, and a draw state. Win, lose, or draw. And your opponent, your adversary on the board has to be ruthless. So dancing with the devil is fine, right? Because you're dancing on the board with your opponent. And the pieces are what are doing the dancing. And it's just a game. And you're learning in the process, so it's just a dance. But it has consequences, it has meaning, it has purpose. And so we should never, ever, take it for granted or just take it lightly or allow ourselves to take it lightly. So who is leading? And then in chess also, somebody leads. In chess also, somebody forces the position, someone is on the attack and someone is on the defensive. It can turn back and forth very quickly, but that's also a dynamic in chess. And the videos we shared, definitely neither Ren nor this other fellow take lightly what they've been through. And that comes through very clearly and very strongly in both of those videos. Jason Ritchie says, Kusanim, brother. Take care all. Szívesen, brother. Viszont látás. Kusanim is Hungarian for thank you. And Tiffany says, I hope your dad is feeling better today or will be shortly. Thank you for your words today. This was nice and deep with great reflection. Thank you for being here, Tiffany. Thank you all for joining us today and sharing this afternoon, this Father's Day. And we hope that it was valuable for you, that you had some good takeaways. I want to wish you all the best to you and your family and your father, wherever he may be, if he's alive, if he's not. A father never stops being a father. And so no matter where your father is, he's looking down and smiling on you and your successes and your achievements and your joys and your happiness as his own, because it is. I don't know any real fathers who do not take and do not feel viscerally, vicariously, all the joy and happiness and bliss of their children and all the successes of their children as their own. And that's why I'm, for the sake of my own father, my biological father, I so hope and pray that I'll be able to have some success in the coming campaign, attend for Conscious Arts, and that he will be able to have that peace of mind and be able to experience and revel in the revelation of who his son really is, because he doesn't really know. So, but that's because his son hasn't self-actualized yet. His son hasn't self-realized yet. So I take this father stuff very seriously. I mean, I'm living at home taking care of him after all. And that is not by accident. That is a direct reflection, as above, so below. My devotion to my family, my biological father, my mother as well, before she passed, is a direct reflection of Atlas's devotion to Allux. So we take this father stuff really, really seriously. And we take our work, these live streams, the videos we do, the books we write, the articles, everything, we take that work so very seriously, because that's our children. That's my gift to the world. Those are my babies, right? Because I don't have a wife, I don't have kids. Everyone on this planet is my kid. Everyone on this planet is my family. I've always felt that. Ever since I was a child, I felt that. I never had the longing to be a father in the biological sense, because I'm not here to be a biological father. I'm here for something more than that. And let's just leave it at that. So thank you all. If there's any more questions or comments, please feel free to share or ask or whatever you'd like. We'll just hang out for another few minutes, I'll give you a minute or two to type away. Tiffany says, thank you again. Have a great week. Thanks, Tiffany. You as well. We don't know what we might do next week. We don't have a topic yet, but it may be that next week we'll see. We'll see what transpires during the week, because normally these live streams have a direct connection to what unfolds during the week. And we will see if our efforts to advance that PowerPoint presentation we're working on get very far. Now, there's also Atlas Conscious Arts, which that needs to start unfolding in a more meaningful way. And so we may do something interesting next week if I can convince some other people to participate. Then we might just have like something akin to like a brainstorming session. And then you're all invited not only to participate, not only to witness that, but to participate and make contributions of just ideas and concepts, and get a general sense of what we're talking about doing. And then and then just have a live powwow about how we might go about doing that, and what are some ideas or possibilities that we could explore pursuing. Because in a previous life, this Atlas Conscious Arts would have been called the Atlas Project. Not in a previous life. You know what I mean? There's just previously in this life, I refer to this whole thing as the Atlas Project. But it is now taken on a form which, well, it was since my Good Friday that revealed to me why it was always Atlas Arts. And that's why today's talk is Our Father who art in heaven, and the importance of that word art. The conscious arts related to life itself, self-actualization as an artist, as a creator, as an individuated essence of God. All of these words are so intimately connected. They were somehow divorced through the years. It's time to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. It's time to reconnect. And the fans of Star Wars and Star Trek and some of these other properties, they're desperate. They're desperate to have the art, right, and inspiration and universal truth and stuff. They're desperate to have that put back into their favorite franchises and properties and mythologies that have been utterly eviscerated by the secular atheist, radical liberal types and their DEI mandates and all that garbage, all that mechanical garbage. And now AI is threatening it all even worse. So perhaps that's what we're going to be talking about next week. But we'll have to see how this week unfolds. As always, follow us on Facebook and we'll always let you know 24 hours in advance, give or take, what the topic's going to be. And it doesn't seem like there's any more questions or comments. So until next week, we want to wish you all to have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful Father's Day. And until next time, as always, we leave you with our signature Gnostic greeting and or salutation, Inverential Peace. Take care, everyone.